everyone, and welcome to Gold Island's live investment summit today, hosted by Six. Today, I'm joined by Adrian Fleming, CEO and Director of Gold Island, as well as Paul Robinson, Vice President of Exploration. Adrian and Paul are going to walk us through a company presentation, and after, we'll move on to a live Q&A session, where we'll be accepting questions. You can submit your questions using the Q&A panel found on the right-hand side of your screen at any time during today's presentation. And as always, the summit is being recorded and will be available to watch afterwards on Six.com in the coming days. So without further ado, Adrian, I'm going to kick things over to you to get us started.
Cam, thank you. Yeah, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is the first of what will be several presentations that we'll be making going forward. And the purpose of today is to give you an introduction to this new company, Gold Island Inc. So this is the same slide, and this is not a glitch. I wanted to just show you this view. It's taken with the drone, obviously, and it's in Newfoundland. And this is the Burton prospects. You can see a couple of people there, and then some big outcrops down here. We've got nice gold samples and grades on the surface in this area, and we'll be talking about this in due course. Newfoundland is an opportunity, and it's a wonderful opportunity and one we're quite excited about. We have a very large land package of about 1,700 square kilometres. There are a number of different properties. We've optioned all these from a gentleman called Shawn Ryan, who's done very careful research to choose areas that he felt were prospective for a gold discovery. We're going to fast track our work this year to drilling. And on our listing property, the Notre Dame property, I expect that we'll be ready to mobilize a core drill in the second half of 2022. And you were just looking at that property in the previous slide. Newfoundland has suddenly become an interesting place to do gold exploration. It seems to be on many people's radar screens. And it's interesting to speculate why it's been neglected for so long. There's actually been limited hard rock gold exploration here. But notwithstanding that, Newfoundland is ranked in the top 10 jurisdictions. And of course, it's in Canada, and Canada is a great place to do exploration. I'm an Aussie. I'm an old Aussie. I've been in the mineral exploration space now for nearly 4 decades. And I've been quite fortunate in that I've been either a member of teams or I've led teams that have made significant gold discoveries in a number of different places around the world. And when you do that, and when that project eventually becomes a mine, and if you've had the good fortune to be financially rewarded for that discovery, it becomes a very addictive process. And so I have to confess to you that I have an addiction to the next project and the next place I'm going to work in, and the possibility that more treasure is going to be found. I mentioned Shawn Ryan. He's a very experienced contractor, a very experienced prospector. Sorry for that blooper. And he has a great track record, and we'll talk about that in a little while. There's 2 other entities that are quite important as part of our company. And the first one is excuse me, the first one is Power One Capital in Toronto. Power One is a merchant banking group. They've raised a bunch of money for us, and they're providing backroom services to our company, and we're very, very pleased to be able to work with them. The other important technical partner or service contractor is Ground Truth Exploration. It's a team of people led by a fellow called Isaac Fage. I worked with them in the Yukon back in 2008, 9, and 10. And Ground Truth Exploration lead and carry out much of the first phases of exploration. And last year, 21, they collected almost 10,000 soil samples for us on 4 of our properties. And the wonderful thing about Ground Truth is that the quality of their work is second to none. Paul Robinson, who's going to be speaking shortly, is a very experienced exploration geologist. He's currently based in Chile, but going to be moving soon to Newfoundland. And Paul will be leading the charge of our exploration activity. So Just a couple of things on this slide and this map. Of course, this is the island of Newfoundland, and these names and these red areas are our 7 properties, and you'll see they're in different parts of the island. More importantly, this slide attempts to show you that there's a number of different styles or types of gold deposits that have been recognized and or recently found in Newfoundland. And I won't go into that, and you can look at this in your own time. The other key thing we've put on this slide in a very simple way is these black lines, which are major structural breaks. These are big cracks in the Earth's crust, and they are the locations and parallel structures and other structures coming off those where you would expect to find gold mineralization. And this is not unfamiliar. This kind of structural setting is common in many other parts of the world. So this piece of crust in Canada is blessed with the right kind of geology to host, I would like to think, a number of interesting gold mineralized systems. Let me talk quickly about some of the people involved with Gold Island. David Donofrio in Toronto with Power One Capital is our CEO. Sorry, he's our chairman, and he's also the CEO of White Gold. John Winger, who works for Contact Gold in Vancouver. Always good to have somebody from the other side of the country I've worked with before, and he has extensive experience in this junior mining exploration space. Paul Pint has worked in the capital markets for many years. He's raised money for over 500 companies. We're very lucky to have him as one of our more active directors. Interestingly, he was the founder and president of Troilus Gold, which has a very nice copper gold project in Quebec, which is under development and will soon be a mine. Our CFO is Jerry Wang. Jerry's had a lot of experience, again, in this exploration industry. He's also one of our directors. We have 2 technical advisors. The first is Shawn Ryan, and Shawn started the work that he does, which is very careful research and then systematic follow-up soil geochemistry in the Yukon back in the early 2000s. And on the back of that, Shawn is responsible for several major discoveries in the Yukon. And in 2011, as you may well know, he was awarded the prestigious Bill Dennis Prospector of the Year award by the PDAC. Ross Sherlock comes from a very different background. Ross is a professional geologist, 30 years experience. He's worked with the Canadian Geological Survey. He's worked with big end companies like North American Goldfields and Kinross. And now he's gone back into academia. He's a professor at Laurentian University in Sudbury. And he brings a great and experienced set of skills to our group. When I asked Ross if he would be prepared to be a technical advisor to Gold Island, he said, absolutely. Just make sure that in the summer I can get out there and get on the ground and look at the rocks. And of course, that's what we need people like him to do. Let me just quickly run through the 7 different projects we have. Notre and Mings up here, and I don't think you can see my cursor, but in the sort of central top part of the slide are our 2 listing projects. Notre on the east side is close to a number of interesting major structural breaks. There's also showings and interesting evidence of the presence of mineralization here, including gold from previous work. And importantly, Notre Dame surrounds the Burton prospects, which I've mentioned before. Mings to the west is also sitting on this major Bay Verte flexure, this very large continental structure that comes powering up through the island in a northeasterly direction, then bends around, fractures the rocks, creates space where mineralization can localize. We've done soil geochemistry, the first phase soil geochemistry on these 2 properties back last year, and assays are beginning to come in. The other properties, and you can see them here as red on this slide of the island blizzard. We've done first pass sampling on that last year, and also Annie. But these others, we haven't got on the ground to those yet, but we'll be working on those during this year, 2022. So an extensive package. Each one of these properties very carefully selected on the basis of the relevant and important criteria. And we have high hopes that with our systematic exploration work, we will finish up making a discovery on one or more of these properties. A little bit of history now. I had a company called Underworld Resources back in the earlier 2000s, and that company optioned a property from Shawn Ryan, south of Dawson City in the Yukon. Shawn had done his research. He'd done extensive soil geochemistry. The figure on the left, you can see a snapshot of that. And so my colleagues and I were very excited when we saw this geochemistry, and we convinced our board to option this property. So we went in 2007 and started doing work. We cut a few trenches. This trench here ran 1.3 grams over 37 meters. And then we weren't able to drill that year. We ran out of time. But in 2008, we drilled 2 holes here, and each of those ran about 4 grams over 20 meters from very shallow depths. The following year, 2009, we put more drills on this property, and by the end of the year, we defined 1 million ounces at 3.3 grams per ton. And so that was a very fast progression for an exploration project. That property was acquired by Kinross in 2010 for $140 million, and that put some nice fat checks in our back pockets. At the same time, Shawn was working about 20 kilometers to the south on what was known as the Coffee Project. So on the basis of essentially no previous work in the area, Shawn was doing ridge and spur samplings, got a few sniffs, went back, did systematic soil geochemistry, which you see here, and nice numbers from those soil samples. That property was optioned by Kamenak. After a few years of drilling, they had defined 3 million ounces of 1.7. That project was acquired by Goldcorp in 2016 for 500 odd million. And Shawn Ryan and his lovely wife, Kathy Wood, did very nicely from those 2 discoveries. So why am I showing you this? It's testament to the effectiveness of green fields exploration. And other than the Burton claims, that's what we are doing in Newfoundland. We're doing green fields exploration. There's limited evidence as to the prospectivity of our different properties, but the criteria are there, the structural, the geochemical, and the other features that we know are important in order for us to go in and do this kind of systematic work. So greenfields exploration works. It's what we're doing. It's led to a number of significant discoveries around the world over quite a long period of time. And it's a process that we're familiar with. We've been successful with it, and we're doing it again. So I'm now turning over to Paul to give you some more geological details of what we're doing and why.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Well, I'll just get straight into it. I'm going to go through each of the 7 projects and look at some maps of them and try and explain why we think that these places are exciting. So, and I think that's right, Adrian, nobody can see our cursors, so I'm going to doodle all over these maps. You can see over here where I've put my arrow over the top of the red lines on the map. So this is what is known as the BVL, or Bayverd line. This is a major continental structure, a suture. And you can think about this area here as the Laurentian continent. And where this line is, right, this is just a line on the map, but it represents where there used to be an ocean. It used to be the Iapetus Ocean. These continents have come together, squeezed all of those ocean sediments, basalts and such ophiolites out of there and created an orogenic belt. So several kilometers of mountains were sitting on top of here, and over 400 million years been eroded off. So now we're looking into the center of the mountain chain. You see how these structures appear to bend off to the east-northeast here. And you see how the general structural trend, it waves around all over the place, but it becomes very much east-west. And this is what's known as the Bayvert flexure. And where you have a flexure in a major fault, any movement, any strike-slip movement along it can open up a great deal of space. And two of our properties, the Mings Bight and Notre Dame property, so I'll just get rid of that so I haven't written over the top of the Notre Dame property. So the Mings Bight and Notre Dame properties occur in this structurally important area. Now, Mings Bight here is a very important place, because if you think about the violence of what's occurred here, this is an area of continental crust that should be part of Laurasia, is part of Laurasia, but here it is some 20 odd kilometers away from its friends. It's been broken off, bent round here, and it's a structurally very prepared area. So we expect that hydrothermal fluids can penetrate these rocks. This is continental crust, but structurally highly developed. Noranda back in the 80s thought so, and so on top of the lake sediment results here that are the government data, Noranda did some work and they had some success with soil sediments. In 2021, we've been trying to repeat some of those, and soon we'll find if we've got any gold at Mings. Further over to the east, we have our Notre Dame project. You can see these three little stars here. These are the Burton showings, or the Burton prospects. And this is the most advanced part of our projects. This area actually has a couple of drill holes that hit straight away, not by us, but by a previous company. So I'll pop onto the next slide and show you that. So this is a zoom up of the Burton prospect, Jonah, Asaya, and Burton. And you can see only Jonah has got any drill holes, LS09, LS11. These holes were the only two that were drilled. They each had significant intercepts of over 0.5 gram. And the rest of the campaign never came to fruition because in this area, like in much of Canada, if you have your drill rig sitting around too long into the spring, you might not get it out, and so it was just necessary to cut the campaign and hopefully come back later. The guys who were doing this never did get to come back later, and we're benefiting from that now. So in 2021, we undertook a soil sampling on this project, and specifically on these prospects to verify soil sampling from previous work. We've also been doing some ground mag, and we think we're going to be ready to drill this project later on this year. So, which brings me on to the general methodology, and this methodology is something that sits hand in glove and is part of what we do with our colleagues at Ground Truth Exploration. When we're dealing with grassroots exploration, we start off with massive land packages typically, and as Adrian pointed out, 107 square kilometers, huge land package to start with. We've got to narrow that down to something affordable. And so what we do is we start with relatively cheap exploration methods over the large areas, and we get down to smaller areas where we can do the expensive stuff. So phase one should be, at least on a meter by meter analysis, something very cheap. This is where we do remote sensing, where we do our aeromag, LiDAR, VLF, etc. And also in phase one, we do a lot of soil sampling, and that's basically because we have large areas without too much outcrop, with a lot of till and a lot of soil cover. And we try where we can to do 100-meter line separations and 25-meter sample spacing. Sometimes that becomes unaffordable, and you just have to have soil lines over whatever kinds of interesting breaks you can see. They can be the major faults that we've talked about, or they can be lesser faults, secondary faults, sometimes identified in magnetics, or they can be lithological contacts. We run lines across all of these areas. We run lines across areas where there might be some till sampling from historical work. And we work out which of those are important and get our area down to something smaller where we can go into phase two. That's where we've got more boots on the ground, mapping, infill sampling, and probe drilling. So this is something to tighten up targets around where we have some soils, and to illustrate that there is mineralization in the rocks, because sometimes the soils can look very good, but that gold isn't from there. It's been moved around because of the glaciation that has occurred in this area. Also, when we've got tighter targets where we're thinking to drill, we might use some induced polarization to get a three-dimensional view of what those targets look like. And only with all of that done are we tight enough to get on to RAB drilling. Now, this is still much, much cheaper than reverse circulation or diamond drilling. And we have a couple of different ways that we expect to use this. One is just simply a sampling technique. Get through the till and sample 2 or 3 meters of rock, hopefully mineralized rock, below your soil sample, and on the right structures and lithologies that you've identified through the previous techniques. In other cases, there might be 50, 60 meter holes that are hitting shallow targets in the same way as you would use a reverse circulation hole. And you can put fences across targets using this relatively cheap technique. And only then do we get to phase 4, diamond or reverse circulation drilling. So if you think about the projects that we have, 7 projects, they're all pretty much grassroots projects, and so they're all phase 1, with the exception of the Burton Claims area, where we're expecting to be in phase 4 this year, doing our diamond and reverse circulation drilling, and hopefully in a position to report something exciting to the market. While we're doing that, the other projects will be moving out of phase 1 into phase 2 and maybe into phase 3. And the beauty of this methodology is we can get from phase 1 to phase 4 using our friends at Ground Truth. They can get us all the way. So this is very flexible for us. We don't have to hire a huge team on the staff of the company. We can be very much more cost effective by using this methodology and with the right service provider. So back to the projects. 2 projects on this slide, Antioch Squatch and Blizzard Pond projects. So the Blizzard Pond project, you can see it occurs to the south of this line of yellow stars, and the line of yellow stars represents a series of showings and several resources owned by Marathon Gold and comprising the Valentine Lake deposit. And this is a classic orogenic deposit. And so because of that, it's structurally controlled, and it occurs like a set of pearls along a necklace. The southernmost part of that prospect here is only 4 kilometers away from our boundary, and it occurs along this Valentine Lake fault along here, which is in effect a splay coming off the RIL. This is the IRL that comes through here, like this. So the IRL is another major continental structure, a suture, and the Valentine Lake deposit occurs on this splay that comes off it, and you can see the shape that I've drawn with these arrows. You can see this looks like a zone of dilatation, the kind of thing that I've spoken of before. When you have strike slip along one of these faults, space opens up. And there are also here northwest striking faults, like this, like this, like this. And these northwest striking faults, whenever one of the northeast striking faults moves, you get opening of space in this direction. A great zone of dilation. This area in the magnetics, a big blue area, very likely represents a large area of dilation. The red areas represent usually mafic rocks associated with these structures. So in 2021, we conducted soil sampling on the Blizzard and the Aniop Squatch projects, and again, we expect to have some interesting results to report to you, hopefully within a few weeks, and we'll know what to do with these projects. But I'm thinking just again briefly about the Marathon gold deposit. There is 4 million ounces of gold so far that has been found at the Valentine Lake deposit, Marathon gold. And that makes it the biggest deposit, the biggest gold deposit on the island. The average grade is 1.7 grams per ton. So what I would ask you is, certainly when we're looking at this particular area, once we do get to be drilling it, think about what 1 or 2 or 3 grams mean over a long distance. A few people have had some really big numbers come out in press releases. Very high grade gold, and that's fantastic. But if it's a skinny vein of very high grade gold, it isn't necessarily any better than a really fat intercept of 1 or 2 grams. So watch this space, see what we get. We should know the soil results soon. Okay, so now we're getting into some projects that we've actually done no work on yet. So I'll just explain why we think these areas are interesting. So the Hodge Mount property, this is a very, very different situation to some of the other projects that we've talked about as well, because whilst we can see these northeast striking faults that go right across the whole project area, these aren't one of the main sutures. The IRL is somewhere north of us here, but nevertheless they are important faults. And if we look at the property package is in 2 parts. We've got, oh dear, okay, that's pretty ugly, isn't it? Okay, never mind. This one is dominated by felsic intrusives, and you can see that within it, I'll get rid of some of this mess. So you can see that within it, there are a set of lineaments in various directions, north, south, east, west, and every shape on the compass. These are mapped from the magnetic studies, and you see they don't go in the same directions generally as the red structural corridors that come from the geological mapping. These are fractures through felsic intrusives, where we'd hope for similar sorts of targets to the kind of things that perhaps Anaconda are looking for up at Rattling Brook and thereabouts. But that's a very different environment to this one. This one, we're outside of the area of intrusive rocks, and now we're into an area of sediments, terrestrial or continental sediments, and these are the same potential host rocks as Sokerman's Moosehead Gold Project. This one. So this part of the project, the Grand Falls area, right next to the town of Grand Falls, this area has the same structural regime as Moosehead, and it has the same potential host rock as Moosehead, a completely different kind of target to the kinds of targets we were discussing earlier. Now, the Hampden property, this is probably the smallest property, but it's got some really interesting things about it that make it a very exciting target. Firstly, this, we don't want that, sorry. This line here represents the Cabot Fault zone. Now, this is a splay off the Bay Vert Fault. In some of the literature, it refers to the Bay Vert Cabot Fault zone. So this is a very important fault, and you can see in the tilt derivative magnetism, there are lineaments of a northeasterly direction that appear to be splays coming off this main fault. You can even see in the digital elevation model here faults in that same direction. So what's this about? Well, again, it's about strike slip movement across these faults. Wherever the Cabot Fault moves laterally, you get the possibility of the opening of, in effect, what is an extensional duplex. So whenever it moves, these little faults are prized apart. So any fluids coming up this fault can move along them and potentially deposit gold. There are some till results within this area, so this is probably mineralization within amphibolite schists, which are the main rock type to the east of this main Cabot Fault. So in 2022, we'll be running our soil campaign across this area, and I hope that we'll get a drill target here as well. Now, the final of the projects, and this project is it's way up here on the very northern edge of the Northern Arm. This project is very different again to anything else that we've seen. Sure, it's got these northeast, north-northeast trending structures, and also it has some cross-cutting structures. So there is the potential for that space. There are also historical lake sediments. These little yellow diamonds are historical lake sediments that all have some gold in them. But the big difference about this area to the other areas we've looked at is the potential host rocks. So this is the St. George's group, and it represents a carbonate sequence, some lake sediments, but I understand mostly shelf carbonates from the edge of Iapetus. And yet this area is part of the Humber zone. It is part of the Laurentian continent. So on the edge of the Laurentian continent and the Iapetus Ocean, you have these carbonates laid down. There are about 7 different facies of carbonate rocks. So plenty of variation, plenty of potential for good host rocks. And it strikes me that within Newfoundland, most of the deposits that people have found so far are of orogenic type, which is they've found that the mineralization occurred at 4 or 5 kilometers depth when there were mountain chains above the zones of mineralization. Now, we don't know what the depth of any mineralization was in this area, but what we do know is that in some parts of Newfoundland, there are epithermal deposits of the same, reasonably the same age, and as the orogenics. So there are puzzles to be solved about why you have mineralization from 1 kilometer depth and 5 kilometers depth sitting next to each other. You've got to find some structural mechanism to preserve those high level types of mineralization. It makes me think about Carlin-like deposits, 3 or 4 kilometers depth, only a little bit shallower than orogenic deposits. And I think what I'm saying is that there is potential in Newfoundland to find Carlin type deposits. That brings me back to the lower grade concept. It's very possible in this environment to find large intercepts of low grade that can give you a high tonnage deposit. So between our 7 property packages, we have potential for a significant variation of mineralization types. And I should probably just stop there and let Adrian have the microphone back. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, great introduction with a lot of detailed geology. So just to quickly wrap up, because I want to go to questions, and I'm sure you have some good questions for us. We have more than $7 million in the bank. We spent $1 million on exploration last year. That money being raised by Power One. 61 million shares, or 62 million shares out. We're going to list, we're heading towards listing. We hope to list in April or May of this year. And just quickly, let's look at some of the market capitalization of some of our peers here in Newfoundland. Of course, the large one, Newfound Gold, with very high grades that they've found, no resource estimate as yet. Marathon, Paul talked about, they're developing a mine. They'll be producing gold in late 23 or early 24. But a number of other companies here have market capitalizations between $50 and $100 million. And I would like to think that we in Gold Island would be at this kind of level of valuation by the end of this year. Our goal with what we're doing here in Newfoundland is to create value for shareholders and for ourselves, of course, because we're shareholders. And so what we're doing is we're searching. We expect to find deposits or deposit. We then expect to define that deposit. And as I showed you, we did successfully, or has been done successfully in the Yukon. And then once we've defined something substantial, of course, one of the big end of town comes along and says, thank you very much. We'd like to purchase this project from you, or the whole company. And we all make some very nice money. So just quickly, the last slide here. Successful exploration requires us to have good properties. We've got those. We're building a terrific team of people. We've got substantial capital already. We're going to be raising more money. We're going to be putting our hand out to people like yourselves, potential shareholders who'll keep the money flow coming. Paul's talked about methodology. I believe in lots of small steps, and after each step you say, well, what did that step tell us and what do we do next? So we know how to conduct this kind of exploration. You have to have optimism and tenacity, because sometimes the first few drill holes that you drill don't hit, but then you know that you're doing the right thing, so you continue. And of course, at the end of the day, machines like this, which drill holes in the ground, is really the only way that you know that you've hit a home run. There's our qualifying statement, and there's lots of infrastructure in Newfoundland. So I'll hand back to Cam. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for the great presentation, gentlemen. I'd like to remind everyone in the audience that you can ask questions using the Q&A chat found on the right-hand side of your screen as we are entering the Q&A portion of today's presentation. And with that, let's launch right into it. Hamish in the audience wants to know if you plan to undertake surface trenching.
Yes, we may undertake surface trenching. I think our default approach will be to use the probe and the rotary air blast drill. It's quicker, it has less impact on the environment, and you get more samples per dollar spent. But trenching is an option, but probably our second choice of methodology.
Great, thanks for that, Adrian. Mark in the audience has a comment and a question. There's been numerous gold exploration companies that have started up in Newfoundland over the past year. What makes yours different, or should he say special than all the others? What time frame are you looking at in order to get a good understanding of these projects as well?
Okay, few different
That's
points.
Two questions.
Yes.
Fair enough. First question, what makes your company different? What makes it special?
Okay, what makes us different and what makes us special, I think, is that we have a track record of discovery and success and of defining sufficient mineralization that rather than having to go to the process of developing a mine, there are medium-sized and large mining companies who are waiting in the wings, watching all of us very carefully, and as soon as you make a decent discovery, they buy you and everybody makes money. I think the other thing that distinguishes us from some of the competition is that we have a number of different projects. We're moving very quickly to qualify them. Some of them we'll decide we don't want to proceed with, but we're on a very disciplined track with our iterative exploration work to quickly get to the point where we know that that's where we should focus the expensive part of the work, which is the core drilling.
Right, thank you. And then I guess his follow-up question is, what time frame are you looking at in order to get a really good understanding of these projects?
Paul, answer this one.
Very good. Well, we should go back to this. So we must remember there are 7 projects. The Burton claims have already had a couple of diamond drill holes, and those drill holes were both successful. So we need to do some more mapping around there. We need to do some more probe. We need to do some probe work on those areas, but we're confident that we'll be drilling the same targets and some new ones in that area this year. So we're going public in the next few months, and by the end of the year, we'll be drilling our first important target.
So Cam, I would add to that answer.
Phase 1.
Sorry,
go on. So yeah. The other projects that are now in phase 1 are moving into phase 2, and some of them will be getting some RAB drilling also by the end of this year. So we should, in terms of our schedule, we'll be drilling a project at least this year, diamond drilling, RAB drilling on multiple projects by the end of this year, and then moving several projects between phase 3 and phase 4 in 2023.
Cam, I'd also just make a comment. When you look at some of the other companies and their progression, and some companies like Lab Gold, for instance, have been in Newfoundland for a year or two longer than we have, I think our progression through that chain will be somewhat faster than some of the other companies, just on the basis of the amount of money we have available and the spread of different types of projects that we have.
Right, okay, great. And Charles in the audience, and you may have gone over this, but he's wondering if you have an anticipated date for trading to begin.
Well, it's hard to know. The stock exchange is processing these things a little bit slower than perhaps they've done in the past. Our lawyers are already working towards the listing process. It's a multi-step activity, but I would like to think April or May we will be public. Obviously, we're private at the moment.
Right, absolutely. What effect has COVID had on your field work in Newfoundland?
Essentially, very little. Newfoundland has 5 categories of lockdown. They are currently in level 4. 5 is the most limiting. Last year, Ground Truth, who were carrying out soil sampling and magnetics for us, as well as several other companies, were able to work through level 4 without endangering either their crew or people that they were potentially coming in contact with. So yes, COVID may well slow us down, but we would like to think that we can minimize the impact of that. But who knows?
Absolutely.
It's with us, and hopefully it will go away soon.
Absolutely. And you just touched on them, but another question we have that's come in is, who is Ground Truth and what do they do?
Okay. Ground Truth is part of the Shawn Ryan, Cathy Wood empire, but they are an independent contracting group based in Dawson City in the Yukon, and they carry out third-party contract activities for us and other companies. So they do soil geochemistry. They have the capability to do magnetics. They have probe and RAB drills. They can do geophysics. So it's a full service exploration group, and we're very happy to be using them in the early part of our work. But as projects progress and as we get into phase 3 and phase 4, we will be relying less on Ground Truth exploration and using other contractors and more of our own team of people. And I would also just make 2 more points about Ground Truth. The quality of their work is second to none, and they are very cost effective.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Jamie in the audience has said, you mentioned that you're raising more money. Will $7 million not get you through 2022?
$7 million will probably get us through to 2023, but we have a lot of ground to look at, and the rate that we do our exploration will be driven to some extent by available funding.
Fair enough. Okay. Another question is, have you seen delays in getting the assay results for your samples? Some exploration companies seem to be waiting 2 months or more for sample assays to come in. So what's the situation with you?
We've been quite fortunate in that Shawn Ryan, with our company and 2 or 3 others that have option properties from him, with the Ground Truth team, produce a very large number of samples per year. I think of the order of 700,000. They are firstly processed by a lab in Newfoundland, then they go to Bureau Veritas in Vancouver, and because Shawn is most likely the biggest customer to BV, he gets preferential treatment. So we generally get our assays back in 4 weeks, much quicker than much of the rest of the industry. Now, BV had a ransomware attack back in December, knocked them for 6, but they have recovered quite quickly from that, and we're back towards 4 or 5 weeks from them receiving the samples to us getting the assays. And so, that's a big plus for us, because if you're waiting a long time for your assays, that really curtails the rate at which you can progress your exploration activity.
Great, thank you for that. John in the audience wants to know, what might the opening price be once you list, and will there be offerings before you list?
How long's a piece of string? We may or may not do some more capital private rounds prior to listing. That really is a decision by the board and our chairman, David Donofrio. And as to what price we might list at, I have no idea. But our most recent round of financing, and that was the lead order for that was Eric Sprott. That was done at 35 cents. So I would expect that when we go public, it will be north of 35 cents.
Great, thanks for that, Adrian. I feel like this question might go to Paul, but what gold deposit types do you expect to encounter, and what types are you looking for?
Well, okay, that's 2 questions. So what types are we looking for? That depends on which property we're on. So on Blizzard and Aniopsquatch, we're looking for and expect to find orogenic mineralization, because the neighbors, that's what the neighbors have. So that's the most likely thing. The same thing would apply to Hodges. I think the same thing would apply to Hampden, because just up the road from Hampden along the Cabot, you have several projects, the Anaconda projects in the Humber area, and those are generally orogenic. So on most of these projects, you'd expect to find orogenic mineralization or mesothermal depth mineralization. I think an important exception to that would be wild bite, and that's because we don't know. Well, we do know that some mineralization must be going on there, because all the lake sediments have afforded some gold. What we don't know is the depth of that carbonate sequence of rocks when that mineralization occurred. And so what happens if you have most of the criteria for finding orogenic mineralization and Carlin type mineralization are very similar. A main difference is the depth of the mineralization. So in that area, there is the possibility of having Carlin-like or Carlin type, but that's something we'll have to find out. The most likely is orogenic mineralization over most of the package.
Okay, great. And when will you start core drilling is the next question we have. At
Burton, we'll be core drilling. We're hoping before the end of this year on the, okay, let me just show again this slide that, so these are the Burton claims on Notre Dame, and we
Paul, can you put the arrow on? Can you put the arrow on where the drill holes are?
Beg your pardon. Yes.
Can you do your arrow thing?
Yes, I can do that.
And while Paul's getting his arrow, just it's important to look at scale here. So from Burton to Jonah is about 1.7 kilometers. So there's a lot of room here for mineralization. Paul, go.
Yes, absolutely. So because we have these two drill holes, historical drill holes, and because they both hit, it isn't that common that really at the outset of an exploration program that you hit mineralization anywhere near to ore grade, and this is somewhere near to ore grade and longish intercepts. So we're hoping to do some mapping here, do the ground mag that's incomplete, and to look for different hosts, because these drill holes intercepted the mafic units that outcrop mostly, but around there are also some schists that may be important as well, and so we need to look at the area in some detail and decide if there are different kinds of targets there. But we expect to be drilling there this year, and we've got this strike length at least to examine. We've done a lot of soil sampling around this area, covering a larger area than what you can see here, and we're waiting for results on that to hopefully extend the footprint as well. So there's a lot going on on the Burton claims this year, and almost certainly involving significant diamond drilling.
So Cam, we've got about 5-6 minutes left. So can we punch in a couple more questions before we have to stop?
Yeah, absolutely. Just remaining cognizant of the time. We will be having to wrap up soon. But another question we do have is, are you looking for high-grade gold like Newfound gold?
I think we're looking for gold, and that's a good question actually, because it's going to be. We think we'd like to on one of our subsequent summits actually talk about the spectrum of grade and viability and deposit size and profitability, but and we're already seeing in Newfoundland, you've got Newfound gold pulling 20, 30, 40 gram per ton over limited widths, And then at the other end of the scale, as Paul pointed out, Marathon Gold, Valentine Lake deposit, more than 4 million ounces, much lower grade, but because it's a large volume and the open pit mining cost is probably $10 a ton, whereas an underground mine, which eventually we hope Newfound Gold would develop, is going to cost $100 a ton to mine. You need 10 times the grade for an underground project as an open pit project to make it viable. So anything on that spectrum from 1.5 grams to 30 or 40, we'd be very happy with. It just depends on how much you can find, the total number of tons of mineralization.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, with the last 5 minutes remaining, I'd like to, of course, thank both of you for coming on today, as well as everyone in the audience. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question, or if you think of one after the summit, feel free to contact the Gold Island team directly. You can, of course, also find more information at goldisland.ca. But with that, Adrian, I'd like to pass things over back to you to wrap things up for us today.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, we will be having additional summits or webinars like this, probably at least one every month. We want to present to you results as they come in, but we'd also like on those summits to, say, bring Shawn Ryan in to talk about his skill set, perhaps Ross, our other advisor, one or two of our directors, because we want you to become more familiar with us as a team, and we want to continue to increase your level of confidence in our ability to create value for you all.
Wonderful. Well, with that, gentlemen, I think we're going to wrap up for today. I hope you both have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.